Go ahead. Welcome, Erica.
All right. Well, thank you all. Thank you, Julia, for inviting me to do this Skillshare. We first started talking about doing Skillshares with our Rebirth group. And one of the Skillshares that I offered to present was on forming and organizing a business because that's one of my skills. Um, Prior to founding a Red Circle, I was a corporate paralegal in Clayton. And so one of the things I did was help um, my attorneys help our clients form businesses, whether it's LLC, partnership, and all those different things. And one thing I noticed when I segued out of corporate into the nonprofit sector is a lot of times nonprofit work gets the approach of a church ministry, so to speak. So it's like you want to do the work, but there's still the business side of it that comes with during the work to keep things organized and funded and flowing and smooth so that you can avoid things like burnout and trying to wear too many hats yourself. If I'm working at a church and I was doing this out of the church would be handling the money, they would be handling the space, the resources as far as phones and all that kind of stuff. Well, since I'm handling the mutual aid work out of a Red Circle, it's up to a Red Circle to provide all of that structure. So I say all that to say that even though we're doing this work as kind of community based, you still need and want the structure to it. That way, the things that you want to get done for the mission flow easier and flow better.
Erica,
And
can
this
you
is a
tell us
structure that,
a little bit about a red circle?
oh, sure. So I founded a Red Circle in 2017. So it's growing 3 years plus, and mainly to begin to look at the various systems within North St. Louis County that impacted healthy communities. Things like healthy food access and opportunities to employment, what the education systems look like out here in terms of the school districts, uh, voting, and access to the arts. Those became our kind of 5 core focus areas. So employment, education, holistic living, policy, and the arts, but strictly within the North St. Louis County region. So my team and I, and it's been various people in and out, board members and advisory council folks, friends, family, but we began to look at, okay, if we want something to happen in the community, we need to have the funding, we need to have people that are interested in this, and we need to be able to explain to people why North County is in need of these things when it's part of St. Louis County, which when you look out on its face, you think St. Louis County is doing fine. But that's a misnomer that I can go into another day. But I spent a lot of time just kind of researching, finding out who was doing what, where, in terms of philanthropy and in terms of economy. Because you can't just have a system that's only going to rely on donations and giving. You have to be able to provide people with the opportunities to work and create and build. And if every single system is designed to hold a certain people group down, just so that the people who do have the resources are the ones continually giving money, that continues to perpetuate the system of racial inequity. So we determined to dismantle that system, by creating opportunities for people, creating opportunities for people to learn how to grow food, to learn how to advocate for themselves and their kids in terms of schooling, to go to the voting box, to create opportunities for the arts, all those types of things. And we're, like I said, in year 3, had some good stuff in place to allow people to sell goods and grow food and all kinds of cool stuff. But then COVID-19 hit and everything got shut down. And so me and Julia, who I met in 2017 when I was just formulating a Red Circle, we came up with, she told us about STL Mutual Aid or Mutual Aid, and we decided to form a program for this, and I would do North County since that's where a Red Circle focuses, and it has grown tremendously from helping, maybe 4 families, 10 people the first week to now we're helping like 20 families a week. We've helped over 300 something people. And we don't just like take them stuff and say, okay, bye, but we follow up with them to see how they're still doing and to see if they want to then contribute in some fashion. Because again, it's not about this charity, I'm going to give you something because I'm better than you mindset. It's let's create opportunities for you to help to build the community that you live in, that you love as much as I do. So that's a red circle. That's my philosophy. And so with this mutual aid work, I approached it, since I do run a nonprofit, I approached it as one of the programs of the nonprofit. Oh, Sarah, I'm sorry, I thought you were trying to get my attention. So we looked at, what needs to happen in terms of once the people call into the hotline or they fill out the application and the names come to North County. At first, I would call people, talk to them, get some specific information, go to the store, buy the stuff, and take it to their house. I do only porch drop-offs, and then I call them on their cell phone or house phone to let them know that I've done it, and then they come outside. Well, it slowly became apparent that I would need more help. And so being a nonprofit, I use tools that are available to nonprofits. And I have no problem, one, asking for stuff, asking for people, putting out on social media, and getting the help that I need. And so I went to volunteermatch.org, which anyone can go to post volunteer needs, volunteermatch.org. And I created a volunteer opportunity for COVID-19 intake. This was in April-ish. And so Volunteer Match was beginning to post or kind of promote specific COVID-19 volunteer opportunities. And so they pushed mine up to the top, and I got responses from people all over the country who wanted to help me make phone calls. And I wasn't exactly sure what that was going to look like, but I knew if I'm getting 10 names for this week, I can't make 10 phone calls and shop for 10 people and take, 10 people. It's just me and my program associate, but I have her doing other stuff. So the first week I got the names and stuff. I interviewed the people to make sure they were actual people and that they were interested in actually helping, not just taking advantage. And so the first week we got on the phone call and I told them, this is what we started doing. This is what I need help with. How does that sound? And so based on the first conversation, they began to ask things like, where do I record the information that I get from the callers, or how do you want me to get the information to you? And I was like, maybe I need an intake form, because since a Red Circle works on mainly community betterment projects and programs and not the one-on-one type of social services that other agencies do, we didn't have a specific intake form just for people. And so I had to create an intake form quickly, which I will put a link to it. It's in Google Drive, so I can put a link to it in the chat box for people. So that gave my volunteer callers kind of a guide of what to ask people. And this was based on what I had been doing. I need to find out if there are kids in the household, like their age ranges, if they have any food allergies, if they are needing hygiene products, what types of products, do they have anything specific? And I've been getting, bring me shampoo to bring me denture cream #3 tablets. I'm like, okay, whatever it is that I can find, I will get it as close as possible. And so having that kind of a format helped. Well, from there, we determined that we needed to check in with each other on a weekly basis, kind of like we do here. And so now on Mondays, me and my intake people talk, and I update them on what's happening with the pods in terms of things like the financial application, or if there's any specific information that I need them to get from people. Like we're doing this grant application now, and they're asking for how many seniors we're helping. Thankfully, we had already started gathering the ages of people, but now we're going to be intentional about gathering the ages of people so that I can report to this grant person, funder, that we are helping seniors. So what I had the people do was when they fill out the form, email it to me, and I gave them a specific subject line to use in the email so I can know that that's what the email is about. And then I print the forms. And at first I was still going out and shopping for each individual form. But eventually that morphed into me keeping kind of a pantry at my house. It's now been moved to my office since the office reopened after quarantine. But we keep like standard items handy. We keep bags. I go to Dollar Tree and buy a ton of the bags that they have because they're nice cloth bags. So we keep bags handy, we keep products handy, we keep diapers handy. And I also bought an extra refrigerator to keep in my house to keep frozen meats and vegetables when I get them and things of that nature to kind of help fill orders faster. One of the other things that we did, because now we have a process of calling people, we have a process of getting their information, of me getting the orders filled as quickly as possible. Well, some people either have transportation and don't have the funds to shop for themselves, or they didn't have transportation or the funds. And so what I began to ask people, instead of me shopping for all the food for people, if people have their own transportation, if they would prefer a Schnucks gift card to buy food. Because if they would like to do that, then I can keep gift cards at the office with the other products. And then I can just fill the bag with the products and the gift card. That way they don't have to spend the gift card on soaps and shampoos and things of that nature, just food. Just an option for people so that they, feel like they have control over what their family is going to eat. Like I said, some people don't have transportation, and so we shop for the food and the supplies and all the other stuff. But if they prefer the gift card, and I usually average around $25 per person in the household. And so if there's a household of 4, they get $100 gift card, and so on, with the diapers, hygiene products, and all of that nature. That way they can only focus on food with the gift card. So that allowed us to help even more families, because then we're spending less time at the store. One thing though, I will say with Schnucks being close to me, the one in Ferguson, they would see me shopping with my name badge and my intake forms. And so they knew that I was shopping for multiple families. They would purposely bag things separately and put it in separate carts and find people to come out to help me take it to the store. So getting the whole, even Schnucks, which for other reasons they get on my nerves, but getting them involved in this, mutual aid work was another way to touch the community. So that way, later on, when say I need some funding or some free food or free gift cards or something like that, I can have that as a reference. And so now we have the process of, like I said, with the intake form, getting the food. Well, we had to start tracking it, because you don't want to do all of this work without having some sort of way to show what you're doing. If you're asking people for money or applying for grants, in our case, you want to be able to give them a reporting so that, when it's time, you can ask for more money to show that you actually were a good steward of what they gave you. And so my data person created, I guess you'd call it a aid map. It's a Google form. And what it is after every drop off, we come back and we enter in the person's name, address, how many people we served, what they received into that database. And then that will actually print out a map for me. And it's been kind of neat, because at the beginning of May, there are pegs on the map that show the different addresses. Well, now there's pegs on top of pegs on top of pegs. And so that's been a good visual for me to use in terms of like doing fundraisers and things of that nature, because then you can actually justify to people, I say I'm going to help this many families in this area. Well, I've helped more than this many families in this area. That's why I need more funding and more volunteers and more folks to help me deliver. I now have 2 people who come to my house on a weekly basis to help me deliver food. One lady comes on Saturdays, one lady comes during the week because she lives closer. The lady who comes from on Saturdays lives in Lake St. Louis or somewhere. But if when, oh, and then there was also one person who first received help through STL Mutual Aid, but then she became someone to help me take groceries. So that was just another point of contact to make sure that people were being included fully in the process. So what I do with my callers is every week the new names come out that are assigned to North County, that are assigned to Erica Williams. And so I take the first and last names, phone numbers, emails, and their category of needs. And I put that into a Google Sheet. And then I add to the sheet the caller's name and if their needs were met. And that way is I can track. I don't know if I can share my screen.
Can you show us that map? It's really impressive.
Yeah, let me see if I can share my screen. If not, I'll send it to you real quick.
You should be able to.
Okay, yay. Okay, so I'm pulling up the map. And so what I do with the callers is I have my Google Sheet divided by the week. So we are now on week 8, which is also, and everything's in alphabetical order. It's another way for me to keep track of whether or not people have been contacted, whether or not their needs have been met. When we get new people, like we're now in week 8, so I've got my callers calling people from week 1, 2, 3, and 4 to check on them, to see how they're doing, to see if they have any additional needs, or to see if they want to now get involved. You know, we don't make it mandatory because we never want to make people feel like just because you receive some help, you have to now help. But we want to give it, you know, as an option, as an alternative.
Are you
Sometimes people are in a situation where they can't, but then they are then able to.
able to share? Did you click the share screen part yet?
Okay, so I just built up my little map. Now I gotta find it. Uh-oh, where's St. Louis? Oh, now I'm in Lawrence, Kansas. Hang on. Hang on. Okay, let me minimize. Oh, Lord, now I'm in Denver. Okay, there we are. Back to St. Louis. Haha. All right, so now I have my map pulled up. I am going to share my screen. Share screen. All right. So this is the North St. Louis County region that a red circle covers with its programming. We have 12 zip codes that we focus on, as long as they fall into the 5 school districts where we focus: Normandy, Ferguson, Florissant, Jennings, Hazelwood, and Riverview Gardens. And so this map allows me to share who's our received support. So that's 93 households that we've been to. The red is where I've gotten things. So sometimes people want to bring me masks or supplies or different things. And so I'll meet them at different places. In fact, later today, I'm meeting someone, a cloth mask for the one couple that wanted some masks, and to have additional masks for other folks. But as you can see, there's like multiple pegs. And then this will also help a red circle to inform where we need to focus, like our concentration for our long-term systemic change programming. Like the healthy community market would have been right around here, which you can see if you look here, there's a lot of need in the area. Versus Florissant, you know, there's some need, but not as much. Normandy area, still, you know, higher concentration of need. And so when it comes time to apply for funding for like our food systems work and other things, educational work, will be able to use this as a tool, as a resource. This here, North County Resource Hub, this is St. Peter's United Church of Christ. It's a great church that's really in tune to the needs of the community, and they're a place where I can either go pick up stuff or leave stuff for other folks to pick up, like Julia left the mask for us there last week with Mama Cat, because that's where she cooks right now. So that's what the map looks like. And let's see. If I zoom it out, I get even more, like specific. As you've seen, since the beginning of April, we've hit a lot of territory.
Yeah, it's so awesome to have the visual.
All right, so I have stopped sharing. All right, so now I'm back. And so we track, and then also because we're a 501c3, we can apply for grants or things like that. But, you don't have to be a 501c3 to apply for grant funding, as long as you have another group that will be your fiscal sponsor. You can be a group of people, you can apply for funding. One other opportunity that's available is through the Presbyterian Church. They have a grant called Self-Development of People, and it is specifically designed for a group of people who have just come together to meet a need to apply for funding. You don't even need a fiscal sponsor for that grant. It's just, 10 people. We're trying to meet needs of COVID-19 folks. This is why we need funding. And so you can apply for that funding also. But, I keep track of my volunteers. I continue to, thank them and let them know that the work they're doing is needed. So that way they continue to make calls for me every week. And I just sent out week 8's list today. Oh, I also provide volunteers with various resources that they can use when they talk to people, because we're keeping the work that we're doing, the provisions that we're making to food, diapers, hygiene product, supplies, things of that nature. But sometimes people are in need of prayer or emotional support or transportation, which, even though we're not providing, I still give my volunteers a list of resources that they can share with people that they talk to. So that way, if someone says, do you all help with this? My caller can say, no, but here is a resource for this. That way it doesn't, continue to be this loop of them looking for help. So I provided, the 211 number, behavioral health response. They're a 24/7 kind of mental health, emotional health resource. Aunt Bertha is one that I just learned about. I hadn't heard of them before. There's a homeless kind of a map thing. Even though it says homeless, they have a ton of resources within it. And like I said, I can share all that too in the chat. And then the last thing that I have created is kind of a follow-up spreadsheet for people in weeks 1, 2, 3, and 4. If my callers call them and they need some extra food or more, diapers, things of that nature, they go on that list. That way I can double check, one, to see if we've helped them out a second time. And that way I can keep track of who we're helping multiple times. And then also there's a list of people who need financial support, but they couldn't apply before the application was closed. So they're on a list now. So once the application reopens or some other opportunities come up for them to get help, then I can contact them. But I spend time, since we had to pivot and we couldn't do all the other things that we were doing, I had more time to kind of keep all of this coordinated and organized. But I try to use volunteers as much as possible to do the legwork, so that way I can keep the system flowing. So that way, every week we know that this person has been helped, this person has not been helped, and we need to do this or that for this person. One thing I did have a question about for once we get into the discussion portion, in terms of the Spanish pod, I didn't know if there was a specific email to reach the folks in the Spanish pod or if it was individual emails. So that's not something that we have to answer right now, but something we can talk about later on, because sometimes my volunteers do reach people who need a Spanish speaking person. And so, being able to send out an email to one person, or a one email address would be useful if that exists. So I will pause there and see if anyone has any questions for me.
So I heard a bunch of resources that you mentioned. Was wondering if you could share those with the group after today. So there's like the intake form that you're using. There's the Google map that you created. You said some stuff about volunteer resources and helping people make callbacks. I think that sounds really useful. Just anything that you have, spreadsheets, stuff like that. Like we want to see it if you're willing to share it, or even if you just take the
Oh, sure.
even if just like, make copies, or I could help you like delete the information so that you're not sharing the information, but just like the template.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that would be super helpful as the next step. But yeah, any other folks want to ask Erica specific questions?
Oh, one final thing I will say is one way to gain support for your work in the pods is if you are on social media, continue to share what you're doing in terms of whom you're helping and how you envision that this work will continue. When I did the grant application for the first grant, I said I had estimated that we would do this work until the first week of June, because that was still like end of April. But cases are still ongoing, they're still rising, the needs are still present, and so we're in the process now of seeking our second kind of wave of funding, because we're in the second week of June and we've already not completely exhausted our first wave of funding, but we don't want to get to the point where we're like, we don't have any funding. So we're in our second wave of, obtaining resources so that we can continue this smoothly without people having to wait for us to, find money for food and gift cards and diapers and things of that nature. You don't necessarily have to keep taking pictures. Like I told this one group, she was like, do you have any new pictures? I'm like, it'll be me and bags of groceries. You have a picture of me with bags of groceries, use that picture. So you don't have to keep taking pictures. Sometimes for some reason we're in this, like, if it didn't happen, or if there's no picture, it didn't happen. Now you don't have to keep spending time on that. But definitely continue to update your folks, update your neighbors, your work people, your school people, and see if they want to get involved. Maybe you said something at the very beginning and they didn't, but now, as things are continually moving, revisit your social media messaging and, put it out there that you can use help, you can use support. You've got a family that, needs this. Can anyone provide this? And so people want to do stuff. Sometimes when things are new, people wait to see if it'll really last and to see if it's, worth getting involved in. But now that we're in this for the duration and people are wanting to do something, put it out there. People can only say no, or they can just keep scrolling.
Awesome. Let's take a couple questions if people have them.
And I saw the chat. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Hey, thanks for that, Erica. That's awesome. I'm wondering two things. One, where in your volunteer infrastructure do you feel the tightest, or where do you need more help? And also, two, what's your big vision for this? I'm getting a phone call. Oops. Where do you see this going, or where do you want it to go?
So at the beginning, I mentioned that a Red Circle can keep doing this work so long as the complete infrastructure stays in place, like the hotline and the application, because that's one of the really good things. We don't have to necessarily look for people to help. We get the names on a weekly basis. And so as long as we keep getting names, we're going to keep doing this work. In terms of volunteer help, always in terms of people who feel comfortable shopping and or sourcing items, I try not to send people to the stores because of the risk of, COVID-19. But if people want to, whether it's procure diapers, that's usually a big ask. Or if we ever see Lysol, again. That type of stuff. I haven't seen it since like mid-March. So that type of stuff is always helpful. And if people want to come over on a Saturday and take groceries to families, that's helpful. But yeah, that's kind of me. I actually have a table on my front porch now. It's my social distancing table. My volunteers come and I have the bags on the table for them. They just pick them off the table and drive to where they need to go. Who else?
I have a question, and this is something that came up in our pod meeting last week. And since you have so much expertise in this at this point, it seems like maybe you're a good person to ask. We had someone who was concerned about potential for like fraud and taking advantage of one's neighbors or community. And I was wondering how you address that, because you clearly have a pretty far reach. And you've helped so many people at this point. What are sort of any policies you have or your sort of perspective on that?
So fraud in terms of a potential volunteer perpetrating fraud, or?
Yeah, the place that he seemed to be coming from was having been involved in our neighborhood association, and there had been instances of either people misrepresenting their own need when they were not experiencing the need they said they were, and also on the volunteer side with embezzlement. So I think he was also like personally wounded, which is where this was coming from. But it was also a question I didn't really have an answer for at the time.
Yeah, so one of the things that I have, one of the ways I have approached this work is from a place of trust in terms of the people who are stating that they have a need. If someone, and you have to kind of gauge what it is you're going to take to them. If someone is perpetrating fraud and saying that they need groceries, well, you're out of groceries. You've taken someone some food. Maybe they weren't as needy as they said, but they're going to do something good with the food. They're going to eat it. So, if they say they have a need, meet the need. Now, if people are starting to contact you guys with some very unrealistic requests, that's, a red flag that might come up, and that's something that you can definitely, let people know that you can't meet. In terms of volunteers creating or perpetrating fraud, you kind of have to be careful with, checking up on your volunteers, checking up on, like I have the people who are calling people, and they're calling from California, New York, New Jersey, Florida, Texas, St. Louis. But when they send the intake forms back to me, and I have a very, I don't know if you would call it strict, but set in stone kind of a process. We don't need to get people's identifying information other than their names, and not their names, but their addresses, so that we can take food. And so when I then call the people before I take the food to them, or I have my drivers take the food. If anything came up that, would result in a red flag to them, they would tell me. Then I would have a talk with that volunteer. So thankfully, I haven't had to deal with that. Thankfully, all my volunteers have been, on the up and up in terms of trust and ethics and things of that nature. But you definitely don't want to send people to people's houses that you don't know. Like the two volunteers that actually drive to people's houses are people I knew already. One lady I met, when I started a Red Circle back in 2017, and one lady I knew from my church. So you don't want to send people that you don't know to other people's houses. You also want to guard, the information that you share with people. Like this map that I just showed you, people can see the pegs when I post it, but I post it as a picture. So you can't necessarily click on the pegs and actually get people's addresses and things of that nature. Does that help?
Awesome. Very much. Thank you.
Awesome.
Awesome. Well, I'll wrap up the recording for now. We can continue to just chat and have our usual discussion if that's okay. But thank you so much, Erica. This is really great, and it's really awesome to get insight into your super organized brain. And hopefully,
one of my strengths.
Yeah, I'm very impressed. So yeah, we'd love to get those resources after this and share with you all, and continue to just learn from each other too. So